The massive doors of the Galactic Defense Force Recruitment Center slid open with a deep rumble that shook the ground beneath hundreds of hopeful candidates. Park Hana stepped through the entrance and immediately felt the weight of 1,000 alien eyes upon her. She was 17 years old, barely 5 feet tall, with short black hair that followed military regulations. Around her towered beings from across the galaxy, each one representing species that had evolved for war. To her left stood a group of Aldorians, their bodies covered in crystal formations that caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. Each one was at least 7 feet tall, their crystalline skin harder than steel armor. They moved with the slow confidence of beings who had never known physical weakness. When they spoke, their voices carried harmonic undertones that could shatter glass when raised in anger. Behind the Aldorians came the Corvan warriors, massive four-armed giants whose thick gray skin could deflect small arms fire. Their culture had produced soldiers for 10,000 years, and every male was expected to serve in their planetary defense forces before reaching adulthood. They carried themselves with the bearing of professional killers, their four hands constantly checking weapons and armor with practiced ease. The snake-like Thessians slithered past in formation, their scaled bodies moving in perfect synchronization. They had no legs, but their powerful tails could crush a human ribcage with ease. Yellow eyes without pupils scanned the room constantly, processing threat assessments with reptilian coldness. Their forked tongues tasted the air, reading chemical signatures that revealed fear, aggression, and weakness in other species. Near the registration tables, a group of Velikans demonstrated their natural speed by moving through combat forms so quickly that their four arms became blurs of motion. Their insectoid features showed no emotion, but their compound eyes tracked multiple targets simultaneously. Each Velokan could process visual information at rates that made human reflexes seem impossibly slow. Among all these impressive alien warriors, Park Hana looked like a child who had wandered into the wrong building. Her human frame seemed fragile compared to the natural armor and weapons that other species displayed. She carried no visible signs of enhanced strength, speed, or durability. Her brown eyes appeared almost comically large in her small face, and her hands looked too delicate to hold military weapons. The whispers started immediately. "Look at the tiny human," hissed a Thessian to his squad leader. "How did such a weak creature even qualify for preliminary testing?" A massive Corvan warrior turned his four eyes toward Hana and laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "I have seen human anatomy charts. They have no natural weapons, no armor plating, no enhanced reflexes. They are prey animals trying to play soldier." "Perhaps she is lost," suggested an Aldorian whose crystal formations glowed with amusement. "The civilian transport terminal is 3 levels down. Someone should direct her to the proper location before she embarrasses herself." Hana heard every word, but kept walking toward the registration line. She had expected this reaction. Humans were the newest species to join the Galactic Defense Force, and their physical capabilities were well documented as being inferior to almost every other member race. Her own planet Earth had only been contacted by galactic civilization 15 years ago, and humans were still proving themselves worthy of inclusion in interstellar affairs. The registration officer was a bored-looking Velikan, whose compound eyes barely glanced at Hana as she approached. His four hands moved in practiced motions, processing candidate information with mechanical efficiency. When he spoke, his voice carried the clicking sounds that all Velikans used for emphasis. "Name and planet of origin," he clicked without looking up from his data pad. "Park Hana, Earth System, Sol Sector," she replied in clear galactic standard. Now the officer looked up, his compound eyes focusing on her with sudden interest. "Human, age 17 standard years, height 1.5 meters, weight 52 kilograms. He paused, apparently reading additional information. "Preliminary test scores place you in the 95th percentile for tactical analysis and strategic planning." The aliens in line behind Hana fell silent. Scoring in the 95th percentile in anything was unusual. Scoring that high in tactical subjects was almost unheard of for any species, let alone humans who were considered intellectually average by galactic standards. "There must be an error in the testing system," muttered a Corvan warrior. "Humans do not possess the cognitive architecture for advanced tactical thinking." The Velokan officer's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. The tests were administered by automated systems and verified by 3 separate evaluation protocols. No errors were detected. He handed Hana a data chip and pointed toward a corridor lined with examination rooms. Report to Evaluation Chamber 7 for physical and psychological assessment. As Hana walked toward her assigned chamber, the whispers behind her grew louder and more skeptical. She could hear detailed discussions of human physiology, most of which focused on her species' numerous weaknesses compared to galactic military standards. Her bone density was too low, her muscle fiber configuration was inefficient, her sensory capabilities were limited, and her lifespan was too short for proper military investment. What none of them knew was the story behind her presence at the recruitment center. 3 years earlier, her older brother Kim Woo had died defending a human colony from raiders in the Outer Rim territories. He had been serving aboard a mixed-species patrol vessel when unknown attackers struck without warning. The official report said that all hands had been lost when the ship's reactor overloaded during combat. But Hana had spent months investigating the incident through unofficial channels. The truth was more complex and more painful. Kim Woo had deliberately overloaded the reactor to prevent the raiders from capturing the civilian transport his ship had been escorting. He had saved 800 colonists by sacrificing himself and his crewmates. But the galactic media had reported it as the equipment failure, not a heroic sacrifice, because human military contributions were still considered negligible by most species. That injustice had driven Hana to pursue military service with single-minded determination. She had studied every available text on galactic warfare, learned the tactical doctrines of 17 different species, and analyzed historical battle reports with the intensity of a scholar, preparing for final examinations. Her bedroom walls were covered with star charts, fleet formations, and strategic analyses that would have impressed Academy instructors. She had also trained her body to its absolute limits within human capabilities. Every morning before school, she ran 10 kilometers through the mountains near her home. Every evening, she practiced marksmanship at the local Defense Force training range. Her academic grades suffered because she spent her study time learning military history instead of civilian subjects. But her parents had eventually understood her dedication. Now, walking through the corridor toward her evaluation chamber, Hana carried the weight of her brother's memory and her own determination to prove that humans could contribute meaningfully to galactic defense. She knew that the physical tests would highlight every weakness her species possessed. She knew that her psychological evaluation would be compared to standards developed for beings with entirely different cognitive structures. But she also knew something that the alien candidates did not. She understood that warfare was not simply about physical strength or natural weapons. She had studied the tactical mistakes that led to military defeats throughout galactic history, and she had identified patterns that suggested most species relied too heavily on their natural advantages and not enough on adaptive thinking. The evaluation chamber door slid open to reveal a sterile white room filled with testing equipment. A holographic display showed her name and basic biological data, along with a testing schedule that would examine every aspect of her capabilities over the next 6 hours. Multiple species of evaluators sat behind an observation window, their expressions ranging from bored tolerance to open skepticism. As Hana stepped into the chamber and heard the door seal behind her, she felt a moment of calm determination settle over her. These tests would measure her against standards designed for aliens with superior physical capabilities. But they would also reveal the qualities that made humans unique in galactic civilization. The evaluators were about to discover that the smallest candidate in the recruitment center might also be the most dangerous. The testing began with basic physical measurements, and immediately, the gap between human capabilities and galactic standards became apparent. Hana's strength scores placed her in the bottom 10% of all candidates. Her speed ratings were similarly disappointing. Her sensory acuity tests showed the limited range that all humans possessed compared to species with enhanced vision, hearing, or chemical detection. But when the cognitive testing began, something unexpected happened. The tactical scenarios that challenged most candidates seemed almost simple to Hana. Problems that required creative solutions came naturally to her thinking process. Most importantly, she approached each challenge with a flexibility that the automated testing systems had never encountered before. Instead of applying standard doctrinal responses to tactical problems, she created entirely new approaches that achieved the same objectives through unexpected methods. When presented with a scenario involving a numerically superior enemy force, she developed a solution that turned the enemy's strength into a weakness through psychological manipulation and false intelligence. The evaluators behind the observation window began paying closer attention as her scores climbed higher and higher. By the time the testing session ended, Park Hana had achieved something that no human candidate had ever accomplished. She had not just passed the evaluation requirements, she had exceeded them in ways that forced the evaluators to reconsider their assumptions about human capabilities. But the real test would come during the final selection process, where her scores would be compared against thousands of other candidates from across the galaxy. Would her unique human perspective be valued enough to overcome the obvious physical limitations of her species? The answer would determine not just her own future, but the future role of humanity in galactic military affairs. The Galactic Defense Academy stretched across 3 continents on the planet Nexus Prime, its training facilities designed to push cadets from 47 different species to their absolute limits. Park Hana stood in the assembly hall with 200 other newly selected recruits, watching as Sergeant Major Vextai addressed the group with barely contained contempt. Vextai was a Corvan warrior whose massive 4-armed frame bore scars from a dozen different conflicts. His gray skin showed the mottled patterns that indicated veteran status in his culture, and his 4 eyes swept across the assembled cadets with the cold assessment of a predator evaluating potential prey. When his gaze fell on Hana, his expression shifted to something approaching disgust. "I see the recruitment standards have fallen even lower this cycle," he growled, his voice carrying the grinding undertones that all Corvans used for emphasis. "They are now accepting beings who would break under the weight of standard combat gear." The other cadets turned to look at Hana, their expressions ranging from curiosity to open amusement. She was assigned to Squad 7, along with 5 other recruits who clearly considered her presence an insult to their own capabilities. Her squad leader was Tokmar, an Aldorian whose crystal formations glowed with barely controlled energy whenever he was annoyed, which appeared to be constantly. "I refuse to have my evaluation scores damaged by carrying dead weight," Tokmar announced during their first squad meeting. His harmonic voice created interference patterns in the air that made nearby equipment hum with sympathetic vibrations. "The human will remain in the rear during all combat exercises and avoid any actions that might endanger the rest of us." Zirlok, a Thessian whose yellow eyes never blinked, coiled his serpentine body into a threatening posture. "My people have a saying about humans. They are soft where they should be hard and weak where they should be strong. Perhaps the instructors placed her with us as some kind of test." The other squad members included a Velikan, whose 4 arms moved in constant nervous patterns, a massive Bruthan whose rocky hide could deflect plasma bolts, and a Shimmering whose translucent body could bend light around itself for natural camouflage. All of them possessed natural advantages that made them formidable warriors, and all of them viewed Hana as a liability they would eventually have to compensate for. The first week of training focused on basic combat skills, and the results were exactly what everyone expected. During weapons training, Hana's small frame meant she struggled with the standard-issue plasma rifles designed for larger species. The recoil knocked her off balance, and her reach was too short to operate the controls efficiently. Her squadmates' comments grew more pointed with each failed exercise. "Perhaps they make smaller weapons for smaller beings," suggested the Velikan with clicking sounds that indicated amusement. "Maybe something more appropriate for hunting small prey animals." But when the marksmanship scores were posted each evening, something unexpected appeared on the Academy's official records. Despite her struggles with the physical aspects of weapon handling, Park Hana's accuracy ratings consistently placed her in the top 5% of all cadets. Her shots hit targets that other species missed, and her target acquisition time improved dramatically each day. Sergeant Major Vextai studied the scores with growing confusion. "Explain how a being with inferior reflexes and limited strength achieves superior shooting performance," he demanded during one of their evening evaluations. Hana's response was simple and direct. "I compensate for the weapon's recoil instead of fighting against it. I use the targeting system's capabilities instead of relying on instinctive aiming. The rifle is designed to be accurate if operated correctly, regardless of the user's physical strength." The explanation made sense, but it revealed something that made the other cadets uncomfortable. Instead of trying to match their natural advantages, Hana was finding ways to achieve the same results through different methods. She was adapting to circumstances instead of expecting circumstances to adapt to her limitations. During tactical simulations, the pattern became even more pronounced. Squad 7 was assigned increasingly complex scenarios designed to test their ability to work together under pressure. Most squads approached these challenges by leveraging their members' natural strengths. Eldorians provided heavy assault capabilities. Corvins handled close combat situations. Thessians gathered intelligence through stealth and so on. But Hana approached each scenario by analyzing the underlying problem, rather than applying standard solutions. When their squad was tasked with retrieving a strategic asset from a heavily defended position, most teams tried to fight their way through the defenses using superior firepower. Hana suggested a completely different approach. The enemy expects us to attack their strongest positions because that is how most species approach combat, she explained during their planning session. But their defense pattern has gaps that we can exploit if we are willing to move in ways they do not anticipate. Takamar's crystal formations flared with irritation. You suggest avoiding direct combat because you lack the capability for honest fighting. Real warriors face their enemies with strength, not tricks. Real warriors achieve their objectives with minimum casualties, Hana replied calmly. If we can complete the mission without losing squad members, that is better than completing it through heroic sacrifice. Despite their protests, Squad 7 implemented Hana's tactical suggestions, because their previous attempts using conventional approaches had resulted in simulated casualties that hurt their overall performance ratings. The results surprised everyone, including the instructors who were monitoring their progress. Instead of fighting through the enemy's prepared defenses, they approached the target facility from an unexpected direction, using terrain features that larger, stronger species had dismissed as impassable. Instead of engaging enemy forces directly, they created diversions that drew defenders away from critical positions. Instead of relying on superior firepower, they used timing and coordination to achieve objectives that had seemed impossible. Squad 7's completion time for the exercise set a new academy record. More importantly, they had achieved their objectives without suffering any simulated casualties, something that even veteran squads rarely accomplished during training scenarios. The other cadets' reactions to their success revealed the depth of their prejudices against human capabilities. Instead of acknowledging Hana's contributions, they attributed their victory to luck, weak enemy programming, or excessively simple scenario design. Tokmar actually complained to the instructors that the exercise had been made too easy, apparently believing that their success diminished his own achievements. But Sergeant Major Vexutai had been watching the exercise through multiple camera angles, and he had seen something that the cadets themselves had missed. The human had not just suggested alternative tactics, she had predicted enemy responses with uncanny accuracy, anticipated problems before they developed, and coordinated squad movements with timing that seemed almost supernatural. That evening, while the other squad members celebrated their success in the academy cantina, Vexutai reviewed the exercise footage for the third time. He had served in dozens of campaigns against enemy forces that used conventional tactical doctrines, and he understood the value of predictable behavior in military planning. But Hana's approach to combat scenarios followed no pattern that he could identify. Her tactical solutions were not based on any doctrine taught in military academies. They did not match the historical examples used in strategic planning courses. Instead, she seemed to approach each problem as a unique puzzle that required creative solutions rather than standard responses. The implications of what he was observing began to disturb him in ways he could not easily explain. Unknown to any of the academy personnel, their training exercises were being monitored by external observers with interests that extended far beyond education. Deep in the Outer Rim territories, the hegemony maintained intelligence networks that tracked military developments across all major galactic powers. Their analysts had been studying human integration into the defense force, with growing concern. Recent reports from their field agents described a pattern of unusual tactical innovations appearing wherever human personnel were assigned to mixed species units. Human crewed vessels were achieving victory ratios that exceeded statistical models, based on their equipment and crew capabilities. Human ground forces were completing missions that other species considered impossible. Most disturbing of all, human tactical approaches seemed to become more effective the longer they remained in active service. Fleet Commander Drexon reviewed the latest intelligence summaries with increasing unease. The humans were not simply adapting to galactic military standards. They were changing those standards through methods that hegemony strategists could not predict or counter. Their success rates suggested capabilities that did not match their documented biological limitations. Perhaps it is time to test these humans more directly, he suggested to his intelligence staff. If their tactical capabilities represent a genuine threat to hegemony expansion, we need to understand their limitations before they become more widespread. The order that went out that evening would set in motion events that would test everything. Park Hana had learned about warfare and reveal capabilities that even she did not know she possessed. The Academy's training programs were about to become something far more dangerous than educational exercises, and the young Korean woman who had been mocked for her physical limitations was about to face challenges that would reshape galactic military doctrine forever. But first, she had to survive what the instructors believed would be her final examination before graduation. The war games were scheduled to begin in 3 days, and Squad 7 had been assigned to roles that would place them at the center of the largest training exercise in Academy history. What none of them knew was that the exercise would become something much more real than anyone had planned. The final war games began with the largest training fleet ever assembled in Academy history. 15 star systems had been cleared of civilian traffic to create a massive battlefield where graduating cadets would face their ultimate test. Park Hana found herself assigned to the light cruiser Defiance as the lowest-ranking officer on the bridge, a position that Captain Rexthor made clear was little more than an observer role. Captain Rexthor was a veteran Corvin officer, whose forearms bore ceremonial scars from campaigns against pirate fleets in the Outer Rim territories. His gray skin showed the deep mottling that indicated high rank in Corvin military society, and his 4 eyes carried the calculating look of someone who had survived battles that killed lesser warriors. When he looked at Hana, his expression showed the polite tolerance he might display toward a child visiting the bridge during a routine patrol. Junior Tactical Officer Park will monitor sensor readings and provide backup analysis if requested, he announced to the bridge crew during their pre-mission briefing. Under no circumstances will she be permitted to access primary control systems or communicate with other vessels without direct authorization. The bridge crew of the Defiance included Navigation Officer Lee Sung, one of only 3 other humans participating in the exercise. Lee was 2 years older than Hana and had earned his position through exceptional performance in stellar navigation courses. His quiet competence had gradually won the respect of his alien crewmates, but he still faced the constant assumption that human capabilities were limited compared to other species. The exercise parameters call for fleet-level tactical maneuvers against an opposing force of equal strength, explained Commander Thockful, the ship's Eldorian executive officer. His crystal formations glowed with anticipation as he reviewed the mission briefings. Victory conditions require capture of 3 strategic objectives while preventing enemy forces from achieving their own goals. The opposing fleet was commanded by graduate-level instructors flying ships, equipped with advanced targeting systems and enhanced defensive capabilities. The exercise was designed to test cadet performance against opponents with superior experience and equipment, creating scenarios that would reveal leadership potential under adverse conditions. But as the war games progressed through their first 6 hours, something began to feel wrong to the participants. The enemy fleet's tactics grew increasingly aggressive, pushing beyond normal training parameters with maneuvers that seemed designed to cause actual damage rather than simulated defeats. Ships that should have been declared destroyed by the exercise computers continued fighting with desperate intensity that belonged in real combat rather than educational scenarios. Hana was the first to notice the pattern developing in the enemy fleet's movements. While monitoring sensor readings from her backup console, she observed tactical formations that did not match any doctrine taught in academy courses. The enemy ships were positioning themselves to capture rather than destroy cadet vessels, creating containment patterns that would allow them to board and secure prisoners rather than simply achieving training objectives. Captain Rexthor, she said quietly during a brief lull in the action, I believe we may have a problem with the exercise parameters. The Corvin captain's 4 eyes focused on her with barely concealed irritation. Explain your concern, junior officer. The enemy fleet is not fighting to win the war game. They are fighting to capture our command personnel and intelligence assets. Their movement pattern suggests this is a real operation disguised as a training exercise. Commander Thockval's crystal formations flickered with confusion. That analysis is impossible. Academy security protocols prevent unauthorized access to exercise areas. No hostile forces could infiltrate a training mission without detection. But even as he spoke, proximity alarms began sounding throughout the fleet, as 3 massive warships emerged from hyperspace directly behind the Academy's defensive perimeter. The newcomers were hegemony battlecruisers, whose dark hulls carried weapons that far exceeded anything mounted on training vessels. Their targeting systems immediately began locking onto the largest ships in the cadet fleet, painting them with the laser signatures that indicated preparation for actual combat. "All stations, emergency alert condition," Captain Rexthor commanded, his voice carrying the stress patterns that Corvins displayed when facing genuine threats. "This is no longer a simulation. We are under attack by hostile forces." The communication channels exploded with confused reports from throughout the fleet as cadet crews struggled to understand how their training exercise had become a real battle. Academy instructors aboard the larger vessels began transmitting emergency protocols, but their messages were being jammed by sophisticated electronic warfare systems that belonged to advanced military technology rather than training equipment. Then the enemy fleet's leader broadcast a message that reached every ship in the exercise area. The voice carried the harmonic undertones of hegemony command structure, speaking in perfect galactic standard with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Attention Academy Fleet. This is Fleet Commander Drexhan of the Hegemony 7th Battle Group. Your training exercise has been terminated. Surrender your command personnel and strategic assets immediately, and your cadets will be permitted to return to their home worlds unharmed. Resistance will result in the total destruction of your training fleet." The bridge of the Defiance fell silent as every crew member tried to process what they had just heard. A real hegemony battle fleet had somehow infiltrated the most secure training area in galactic space and was now demanding the surrender of Academy personnel and equipment. The implications were staggering, both for galactic security and for the immediate survival of everyone participating in the exercise. Captain Rexthor's 4 hands moved across his control panels with practiced efficiency, but his actions revealed the limitations of their situation. The Defiance was a training vessel with limited weapons and defensive capabilities. Against hegemony battlecruisers, they were helplessly outmatched in every category of combat performance. "Navigation. Plot a course away from the engagement zone," he ordered. "Communications, transmit emergency signals to Sector Command. All stations, prepare for possible engagement with superior forces." But Hana was studying the tactical display, with growing understanding of what was really happening. The hegemony fleet was not conducting a random attack on Academy forces. They had planned this operation specifically to test human military capabilities under real combat conditions. The timing, the target selection, and the strategic objectives all pointed to an intelligence operation designed to evaluate whether humans represented a genuine threat to hegemony expansion plans. "Captain," she said, her voice carrying a calm authority that seemed impossible for someone her age. "Request permission to implement a tactical response to this situation." The request was so unexpected that it took several seconds for the bridge crew to react. Commander Thokval's crystal formations flared with disbelief, while the navigation officer Lee Sung turned from his console with an expression of concerned curiosity. "You are a junior tactical officer with no combat experience," Captain Rexthor replied, his 4 eyes focusing on her with something approaching amazement. "This is not a training scenario. Real beings are dying and we are facing an enemy force with overwhelming advantages in firepower and tactical position." "Yes, sir," Hana replied. "That is exactly why conventional tactical responses will not work. The enemy expects us to behave according to standard Defense Force doctrine. They have planned this operation based on predictable reactions from Academy personnel. If we respond in ways they cannot anticipate, we can create tactical opportunities that do not currently exist." The proximity alarm suddenly intensified as a hegemony destroyer broke away from the main battle group and began pursuing the Defiance directly. The enemy ship's weapons began charging, painting their hull with targeting signatures that indicated they were no longer interested in capture, but had decided to eliminate potential threats. "They have identified us as dangerous somehow," Lee Sung reported from his navigation console. "We are being specifically targeted for destruction." The realization hit Captain Rexthor like a physical impact. Somehow the enemy had recognized that this small training vessel posed a threat to their operation. The young human tactical officer, who had just requested permission to engage a vastly superior enemy force, was apparently considered dangerous enough to warrant immediate elimination. His military training warred with his protective instincts as he stared at Park Hana. She was 17 years old, barely qualified for basic tactical duties, and completely inexperienced in real combat. But she was also the being who had achieved impossible scores in Academy strategic planning courses, and her approach to training scenarios had consistently produced results that defied conventional military analysis. "State your tactical plan," he said finally. Hana's response would either save them all or get them killed in the next few minutes. But as plasma bolts began impacting their shields and the hegemony destroyer closed range for what would certainly be a killing blow, Captain Rexthor found himself hoping that human tactical capabilities were as unpredictable as the Academy rumors suggested. "The hegemony's greatest weakness is their rigid command structure," Hana explained, her fingers moving across her console with rapid precision. "They cannot adapt quickly when their plans are disrupted by actions they cannot predict or categorize. We use that limitation against them. How exactly do we disrupt a battle fleet with one light cruiser?" For the first time since the crisis began, Park Hana smiled. It was not a pleasant expression, and it carried implications that made everyone on the bridge suddenly understand why the enemy might consider her dangerous. "We make them think we are something we are not, then attack them where they cannot defend. But I will need authorization to access restricted tactical systems and permission to implement maneuvers that violate standard safety protocols." The decision Captain Rexthor made in that moment would determine whether the crew of the Defiant survived the next 10 minutes. It would also establish precedents for human tactical doctrine that would reshape galactic military thinking for generations to come. But first, they had to live long enough to prove that human capabilities extended far beyond what anyone had imagined possible. Captain Rexthor's decision came without hesitation, driven by the desperate certainty that conventional tactics would only delay their destruction by a few minutes. "Authorization granted. All stations will follow Junior Tactical Officer Park's orders without question. Navigation Officer Lee, you have tactical command authority." Hana's fingers flew across her console as she accessed the ship's restricted systems, unlocking capabilities that were normally reserved for veteran crews facing extreme emergencies. The Defiance was a training vessel, but it carried full military-grade equipment for exactly this type of crisis situation. "Lee, I need you to plot a direct course toward the enemy flagship at maximum acceleration," she ordered, her voice carrying calm authority that seemed impossible for someone facing their first real combat. "Make it look like we are preparing for a suicide attack." "That is suicide," protested Commander Thokval, his crystal formations flaring with alarm. "Their point defense systems will destroy us before we can get within effective weapons range. Not if they believe we are carrying a quantum torpedo, configured for kamikaze detonation." Hana manipulated the ship's energy signature, with precise adjustments to their shield harmonics and engine output patterns. "I am making our power readings match a vessel that has been modified for a suicide run. When they scan us, they will detect what appears to be an overloading reactor designed to create a massive explosion." Captain Rexthor watched his tactical display as the Defiance's sensor profile transformed into something that would terrify any enemy commander. Ships configured for kamikaze attacks were among the most feared weapons in galactic warfare, because they could inflict catastrophic damage even against vastly superior forces. "They will be forced to destroy us at maximum range to prevent damage to their flagship," he realized. "But while they are repositioning to engage us safely, they must open gaps in their defensive formation." "Exactly." Hana highlighted sections of the tactical display where the enemy's formation would necessarily weaken to avoid potential blast damage. "Lee, the moment they begin their attack run against us, I need you to execute an emergency hyperspace jump directly into that gap." Lee Sung's hands hesitated over his navigation controls as his training conflicted with what seemed like an impossible maneuver. "Hana, emergency jumps inside a combat zone violate every safety protocol in the manual. We could emerge inside an enemy ship or collide with debris fields." "We will emerge exactly where I calculated," Hana replied with quiet confidence that somehow seemed completely convincing. "Right behind their command cruiser's shield generators. close enough to disable their primary systems before they can react to our presence. The hegemony destroyer that had been pursuing them suddenly broke off its attack run, racing back toward the main fleet as urgent communication bursts flooded the enemy frequencies. Fleet Commander Drexhan's voice cut through the chaos, his harmonic undertones showing stress patterns that indicated genuine alarm. All vessels, immediate dispersal pattern 7. Suicide vessel approaching flagship on direct vector. Estimated blast radius 12,000 kilometers. All ships clear the impact zone immediately. The precisely coordinated hegemony formation dissolved into chaos as massive warships scrambled to escape the potential destruction radius of what they believed was an approaching kamikaze attack. The defensive perimeter that had seemed impenetrable moments before opened like a flower, creating exactly the tactical opportunity that Hana had predicted. "Execute jump now," she commanded. The universe twisted around them as the Defiance vanished from normal space, leaving only the ghost of their energy signature racing toward the enemy flagship, like approaching doom. For 3 eternal seconds, they existed in the space between dimensions, while Lee Sung's navigation systems calculated their emergence point with mathematical precision that would have impressed Academy instructors. They materialized less than 200 meters from the Hegemony command cruiser's engine section, so close that both ships' shields sparked and flared where they intersected. The enemy vessel's point defense systems had not even begun to track their approach, and for a crucial moment, the most powerful ship in the Hegemony fleet was completely vulnerable to attack. "All weapons fire on my command," Hana ordered, her voice carrying across the bridge with absolute authority. "Target their shield generators, communication arrays, and engine control systems. We have approximately 8 seconds before they can respond." The Defiance's weapons, modest by capital ship standards but devastating at point-blank range, tore into the enemy cruiser's critical systems with surgical precision. In the space of 6 seconds, Fleet Commander Drexhan's flagship went from the invincible center of his formation to a crippled vessel struggling to maintain basic power and life support. But Hana was not finished with her tactical surprise. As the enemy ship's shields failed and secondary explosions began cascading through their hull, she opened a direct communication channel to the Hegemony commander's bridge. When she spoke, her voice was calm and professional, carrying the tone of someone who had achieved exactly what they intended to accomplish. "Fleet Commander Drexhan, this is Junior Tactical Officer Park Hana of the Galactic Defense Force. Your flagship is disabled, your formation is broken, and you are now within range of Academy defense platforms that were never actually offline. I am prepared to offer terms for your immediate surrender." The silence that followed stretched across the void as thousands of beings on both sides of the battle tried to process what they had just witnessed. A human cadet, barely old enough to legally pilot a starship, had just outmaneuvered a veteran fleet commander and placed his entire invasion force in an impossible tactical position. Captain Rexthor stared at his young tactical officer with something approaching awe. In the space of 15 minutes, she had transformed what appeared to be certain destruction into complete tactical victory, using nothing more than psychological warfare and precise timing. The implications of what he was witnessing would reshape his understanding of human military capabilities forever. When Fleet Commander Drexhan's response finally came, his harmonic undertones carried something that his species only displayed in the presence of a superior predator. The sounds indicated respect mixed with instinctive recognition of danger. "State your terms, Park Hana of Earth. The Hegemony. 7th Battle Group is prepared to negotiate." The communication channel remained open as Hana prepared to dictate surrender terms to forces that outnumbered the Academy fleet by more than 3-1. Around the bridge of the Defiance, her crewmates watched with amazement as their youngest officer prepared to accomplish what seasoned military strategists would have considered impossible. "Your terms are simple, Commander," she replied. "Immediate withdrawal of all Hegemony forces from Academy space, return of any captured personnel or equipment, and formal guarantees that training exercises will not be targeted for infiltration operations in the future." "You speak of guarantees while commanding a single light cruiser against a battle fleet." Drexhan responded, his voice carrying undertones of incredulity mixed with grudging respect. "What prevents us from simply overwhelming your position through superior numbers?" Hana's answer revealed the depth of strategic thinking that had been developing throughout her military training. "Because, Commander, you are not fighting a single ship. You are fighting the tactical doctrine of an entire species that you clearly do not understand. On her signal, Li Sung transmitted sensor readings that showed the true scope of her tactical plan. While the hegemony fleet had been focused on the dramatic approach of the Defiance, the remaining Academy ships had been moving into predetermined positions under guidance that Hana had transmitted during their approach maneuver. What appeared to be a scattered and demoralized training fleet was actually a carefully orchestrated formation designed to exploit the specific weaknesses in hegemony tactical doctrine that she had identified during her studies of galactic military history. Your ships are now positioned within overlapping fields of fire from vessels you dismissed as irrelevant, Hana continued. Your flagship is crippled, your formation is broken, and every move you have made has been anticipated and countered. The question is not whether you can defeat us. The question is whether you are willing to sacrifice your entire fleet to learn how badly you have underestimated human tactical capabilities. Fleet Commander. Drexhan's response came after a long pause, filled with urgent communications between hegemony vessels. When he spoke again, his harmonic patterns carried the formal cadences that indicated official surrender, according to galactic military protocols. The Hegemony 7th Battle Group accepts your terms, Park Hana of Earth. We will withdraw immediately and provide the requested guarantees regarding Academy operations. But I must ask one question for our intelligence records. How does one so young possess knowledge of our tactical weaknesses that our own analysts have never identified? Hana's answer would become legend in military academies across the galaxy, studied by strategists and quoted by historians for generations to come. Her words carried the weight of a species that had learned to find victory against impossible odds, and the quiet confidence of someone who understood that true strength came not from natural weapons or superior technology, but from the willingness to adapt and overcome any challenge. Because, Commander, humans do not fight the way you expect us to fight. We do not follow the rules that other species consider absolute. When you study our tactics, you are trying to understand patterns where none exist. We adapt to win, not to conform to doctrine. That is why your intelligence reports cannot predict our behavior, and it is why underestimating us will always be a fatal mistake. The communication channel closed with Fleet Commander Drexhan's final transmission, his words carrying implications that would ripple through galactic politics for years to come. The hegemony will remember the name Park Hana. We will not make the error of underestimating human capabilities again. As the enemy fleet began its withdrawal, Academy communication networks exploded with congratulations and requests for tactical analysis from military commands throughout the galaxy. But on the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Rexthor simply looked at his young tactical officer with newfound understanding of what humanity could contribute to galactic civilization. Junior Officer Park, he said formally, I believe your days of being underestimated are officially over. The communication networks across the Academy fleet buzzed with disbelief as news of the hegemony surrender spread from ship to ship. Officers who had dismissed Park Hana as an unqualified cadet now found themselves studying tactical recordings of her maneuvers with the intensity of scholars examining ancient texts. The impossible had become reality, and the implications were staggering for everyone involved. Admiral Kethron, the senior Academy commander whose flagship had been saved by Hana's intervention, transmitted a fleet-wide message that would be recorded in the permanent archives of galactic military history. His crystalline Aldorian features showed the deep blue glow that indicated profound respect as he addressed the thousands of cadets and instructors who had witnessed the unprecedented victory. The events of today have demonstrated tactical capabilities that exceed our current understanding of combat doctrine, he announced. Junior Tactical Officer Park Hana has achieved what military strategists would have considered impossible, using methods that our academies do not currently teach. Her actions have not only saved Academy personnel from capture, but have also revealed new approaches to galactic warfare that must be studied and understood. The immediate aftermath of the crisis brought unexpected changes to Academy protocols and human status. Within the Galactic Defense Force, emergency sessions were called to analyze Hana's tactical innovations, and senior commanders from multiple species requested detailed briefings on human military capabilities. The species that had been considered too weak for serious military roles was suddenly being viewed as a potential source of strategic revolution. But the most significant changes occurred in how other cadets and instructors treated human personnel. Tokamar, the Aldorian squad leader who had dismissed Hana as dead weight, now approached her with the respectful bearing that his culture reserved for proven warriors. His crystal formations glowed with what appeared to be genuine admiration as he addressed her during their next squad meeting. "I have reviewed the tactical recordings of your maneuvers," he said, his harmonic voice carrying undertones of apology. "My people pride ourselves on logical thinking, but your approach to combat problems follows patterns that our analysts cannot predict or duplicate. I would be honored to learn from your methods if you are willing to share them." Even Zirlok, the Thessian whose yellow eyes had shown only contempt for human capabilities, coiled his serpentine body in the posture that indicated respect for a superior predator. "My species teaches that adaptation is the highest form of intelligence," he said. "You have demonstrated adaptation capabilities that exceed what we believed possible for any single being. I apologize for my previous assessment of human military value. The transformation in attitudes extended beyond the Academy to the highest levels of galactic military command." Intelligence reports began flooding in from across the galaxy describing similar incidents where human personnel had achieved impossible victories using tactics that defied conventional military analysis. Human crewed vessels were completing missions that other species had written off as hopeless, and human tactical innovations were being implemented by mixed species units with dramatic improvements in success rates. Fleet Commander Drexhan, whose forces were now withdrawing toward hegemony space under the terms of surrender, transmitted a final communication to Academy Command that revealed the true scope of what had occurred. His message was intended for senior military analysts, but it was also shared with the cadet who had engineered his defeat. "The human tactical approach represents a fundamental shift in combat methodology that our strategists cannot counter using conventional responses," he reported. "Their ability to create victory conditions where none previously existed, combined with their willingness to implement solutions that other species would consider impossible, makes them a strategic threat of the highest order. The hegemony recommends avoiding direct confrontation with human-commanded forces until we can develop new, tactical doctrines specifically designed to counter their unpredictable capabilities." The report continued with detailed analysis of Hana's maneuvers. But what impressed galactic military leaders most was the admission that a species known for rigid tactical discipline had been completely outmaneuvered by a 17-year-old cadet using a single light cruiser. The psychological impact of the victory was already reshaping strategic calculations across the galaxy. Within days of the incident, Park Hana found herself summoned to meetings with senior Academy officials who wanted to understand how she had developed tactical capabilities that exceeded established military doctrine. The sessions revealed the depth of study and preparation that had driven her military career, but they also uncovered something that surprised even her instructors. "Your approach to tactical problems appears to be instinctive rather than learned," observed Professor Kolthek, a Velicon strategic analyst whose compound eyes could process multiple tactical scenarios simultaneously. "You do not apply standard doctrinal responses to bad situations. Instead, you seem to create entirely new solutions for each unique challenge." The analysis was accurate, but it also revealed something about human military psychology that had not been previously understood. While other species trained their military personnel to follow established tactical doctrines with minor variations for specific circumstances, humans appeared to approach each combat situation as a unique puzzle, requiring creative solutions. "Human tactical thinking does not follow the pattern-based approaches that other species use," Hana explained during one of her debriefing sessions. "We do not assume that previous solutions will work for current problems. Each situation requires analysis of specific factors and development of methods that take advantage of unique opportunities." The explanation was simple, but its implications were revolutionary for galactic military theory. It suggested that human tactical capabilities would continue to evolve and improve with experience in ways that other species could not predict or counter. More importantly, it meant that human military contributions would become more valuable over time rather than reaching a plateau of effectiveness. Admiral Kethron made the official announcement during an Academy-wide assembly that brought together cadets and instructors from all 47 member species. His words would reshape human status within the Galactic Defense Force and establish precedents that would influence military policy for generations. Junior Tactical Officer Park Hana will be granted immediate promotion to lieutenant rank and assigned to the Strategic Innovation Division, where her tactical insights will be used to develop new training protocols for multi-species combat operations. Additionally, all human military personnel will be eligible for accelerated advancement opportunities based on demonstrated tactical capabilities rather than standard progression requirements. The announcement represented more than individual recognition for Hana's achievements. It was formal acknowledgement that humanity had become a strategic asset for galactic defense, rather than a minor member species requiring protection and guidance. The implications extended far beyond military matters to diplomatic and economic relationships throughout galactic civilization. But perhaps the most significant change was in how humans themselves began to view their role in galactic affairs. The species that had been told they were too weak for serious military service was now being sought out for tactical innovations that could revolutionize warfare. Young humans across the galaxy began applying for military service in numbers that exceeded Academy capacity to train them. Li Sung, the navigation officer who had implemented Hana's impossible maneuvers with precise skill, found himself promoted to lieutenant rank and assigned as her permanent tactical partner. Their cooperation during the crisis had demonstrated that human tactical capabilities were enhanced when multiple human personnel worked together, using their shared approach to creative problem-solving. "I have been studying the tactical recordings," he told Hana during one of their planning sessions for the Strategic Innovation Division. "What we accomplished was not just individual brilliance. It was the result of two humans thinking in ways that complement each other while remaining unpredictable to non-human observers. The observation led to new research into human tactical psychology and the development of training programs designed to enhance the natural capabilities that had made Hana's victory possible, but it also revealed something that would concern enemy strategists throughout the galaxy. Human tactical capabilities appeared to improve dramatically when multiple humans worked together using their shared approach to adaptive thinking. Small units of human personnel were achieving results that exceeded what much larger mixed-species forces could accomplish using conventional tactics. The implications suggested that humanity's military value would continue to increase as more humans gained experience in galactic warfare. The Academy Gambit, as military historians would later call the incident, had demonstrated that the species once mocked for their physical limitations possessed tactical capabilities that could reshape the balance of power throughout galactic civilization. But more importantly, it had proven that underestimating human potential was a mistake that no enemy force could afford to make twice. As Park Hana prepared to begin her new assignment in the Strategic Innovation Division, she carried with her the knowledge that her actions had changed more than her own career prospects. She had altered the fundamental assumptions that governed galactic military thinking and established humanity as a force that enemy commanders would learn to fear not for their strength, but for their unpredictable capacity to find victory where others saw only defeat. 6 months after the Academy Gambit, Lieutenant Park Hana stood before the Galactic Defense Council in the Great Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime. The massive chamber held representatives from 47 species, all of whom had come to witness what many considered the most significant military policy announcement in galactic history. The young Korean woman who had once been mocked for her physical limitations was now at the center of a strategic revolution that was reshaping warfare throughout known space. Admiral Kethron rose from his position at the speaker's podium, his crystalline Aldorian features glowing with ceremonial light as he addressed the assembled delegates. His words would be recorded in the permanent archives of galactic civilization and studied by military historians for centuries to come. The events that began as a training exercise at Academy Zone 7 have revealed capabilities that force us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about combat tactics and strategic planning, he announced. Lieutenant Park Hana's tactical innovations have demonstrated that human military doctrine represents an evolutionary advance in warfare methodology that extends far beyond individual brilliance. The audience included many of the same beings who had dismissed human military capabilities during the early days of their species' integration into galactic society. Now they listened with respectful attention as Admiral Kethran detailed the implications of what had become known as the Human Tactical Revolution. Reports had continued to flood in from across the galaxy, describing incidents where human personnel achieved impossible victories using methods that defied conventional military analysis. Human crewed vessels were completing missions that other species had written off as hopeless. Mixed species units with human tactical officers were achieving success rates that exceeded previous records by substantial margins. Most significantly, enemy forces throughout the galaxy had begun avoiding direct confrontation with human-commanded units whenever possible. The psychological impact of unpredictable human tactics was proving as valuable as any technological advantage, creating strategic opportunities that extended far beyond individual battle outcomes. The hegemony has formally requested negotiation protocols for conflicts involving human military personnel, Admiral Catherine continued. Their intelligence reports indicate that conventional tactical responses are ineffective against human adaptive capabilities, and they consider direct confrontation with human-commanded forces to be strategically inadvisable. The implications of the statement sent whispers of amazement through the assembly chamber. The hegemony was among the most aggressive military powers in galactic space, known for their willingness to engage any opponent regardless of tactical disadvantages. Their admission that human tactical capabilities represented an insurmountable challenge confirmed what military analysts had been reporting from across the galaxy. Fleet Commander Drexon, whose surrender to Park Hana had initiated the broader recognition of human tactical superiority, had provided additional intelligence through carefully arranged diplomatic channels. His reports described a fundamental shift in hegemony strategic planning, based on their inability to predict or counter human military innovations. Human tactical methodology does not follow patterns that our strategists can analyze or duplicate, his classified report had stated. Each engagement reveals new approaches that seem to violate established principles of warfare while achieving superior results. We recommend classifying human military capabilities as a strategic threat of the highest priority. But the most remarkable development was not the enemy recognition of human tactical superiority. It was the transformation in how humanity itself approached military service and strategic thinking. Young humans across the galaxy were applying for defense force positions in unprecedented numbers, drawn by the realization that their species possessed unique capabilities that could make decisive differences in galactic conflicts. The Strategic Innovation Division, where Lieutenant Park Hana now served as senior tactical analyst, had become the most sought-after assignment in the Defense Force. Human personnel were being paired with tactical officers from other species to develop new approaches to warfare that combined human adaptive thinking with alien technological and physical advantages. Lee Sung, now serving as navigation commander aboard the heavy cruiser Determination, had become the first human to command a mixed-species crew in frontline operations. His success in implementing tactical innovations developed by Hana's division had established precedents for human command authority that would have been unthinkable before the Academy Gambit. The transformation in galactic military doctrine extends beyond tactical innovations to fundamental changes in strategic planning methodology, Admiral Catherine explained to the assembled delegates. Human tactical officers are now being assigned to command positions throughout the Defense Force, where their adaptive capabilities are being used to develop entirely new approaches to interstellar warfare. The announcement represented official recognition that humanity had evolved from a protected member species to a strategic asset whose capabilities were essential for galactic defense. But it also carried implications that would reshape diplomatic relationships throughout known space. Species that had previously dominated galactic military affairs now found themselves seeking human tactical advice for their own defense planning. The Eldorians, whose technological superiority had made them influential in Defense Force policy, were implementing training programs based on human tactical methodology. The Corvins, whose warrior culture had shaped military doctrine for centuries, were adapting their traditional approaches to incorporate human innovations. Most remarkably, former enemies were requesting permission to study human tactical capabilities through diplomatic exchanges rather than attempting to counter them through military action. The species that had been considered too weak for serious warfare had become so formidable that their opponents preferred negotiation to confrontation. During the formal recognition ceremony, Lieutenant Park Hana received the Defense Force Medal of Strategic Excellence, an honor previously awarded only to veteran commanders with decades of combat experience. But the medal was less significant than the assignment that accompanied it. Lieutenant Park Hana is hereby appointed as Director of Tactical Innovation for the Galactic Defense Force, Admiral Kethran announced. In this capacity, she will oversee the development of new combat doctrines that incorporate human adaptive capabilities with the technological and biological advantages of all member species. The appointment carried authority that extended throughout Galactic Military Command structure. At 18 years old, Park Hana had become one of the most influential strategic planners in known space, with responsibility for developing tactics that would determine the outcome of conflicts across the galaxy. But perhaps the most significant aspect of her new position was its symbolic importance for humanity's role in galactic civilization. The species that had been mocked for their physical limitations had produced a strategic leader whose innovations were reshaping the fundamental nature of warfare. As the ceremony concluded and delegates began filing out of the assembly chamber, Park Hana remained at attention until the formal protocols were complete. But privately, she was already analyzing intelligence reports from the frontier sectors, where new threats were emerging that would test everything she had learned about adapting human tactical capabilities to galactic-scale conflicts. Captain Rex Thor, now serving as her operational commander in the Strategic Innovation Division, approached with the respectful demeanor he had maintained since the Academy Gambit. His forearms carried data tablets containing mission briefings for conflicts that would require the innovative approaches that only human tactical thinking could provide. "Director Park," he said formally, "your first strategic planning session is scheduled for tomorrow morning. The scenarios we are facing now make our Academy crisis look like a basic training exercise." Hana's response carried the same quiet confidence that had guided her through every challenge she had faced since joining the Defense Force. "Understood, Captain. When do we begin?" The question was rhetorical, because they both knew that for Park Hana and the human tactical revolution she represented, the real work was just beginning. Across the galaxy, military academies were implementing training programs based on her innovations. Young officers from dozens of species were learning to think beyond conventional tactical limitations, and the ripple effects of the Academy Gambit continued to reshape the fundamental nature of galactic warfare. The young Korean woman who had once been dismissed as too small and too weak to serve alongside alien warriors had become the catalyst for a transformation in military thinking that would influence galactic civilization for generations. But more importantly, she had proven that humanity's greatest strength lay not in matching the physical capabilities of other species, but in their unique capacity to find solutions where others saw only problems. As she left the assembly hall to begin the next phase of her career, Lieutenant Park Hana carried with her the knowledge that somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, enemy commanders were learning to fear not human weapons or human technology, but the terrifying unpredictability of human tactical imagination. The species that had been mocked for their fragility had revealed themselves to be the most dangerous strategic thinkers in the galaxy. The Academy Gambit was over, but the revolution it had started would continue to reshape galactic warfare for centuries to come. And at its center stood a young human woman, whose name had become synonymous with the tactical innovations that made victory possible, even against impossible odds. The war games had ended, but the real work of defending galactic civilization was just beginning. And humanity would never again be underestimated by anyone who understood the true meaning of adaptive tactical superiority.